Why has not the Commission made haste to offer us the detailed account of the reforms to effectuate, and of the ameliorations to be obtained, instead of confining itself to letting us have but a glimpse of that inviting perspective? Why did it previously propose a tax upon salt? It is because you have already rejected it several times that this tax obtains the priorities. And if it is true that a legislator must tremble in proposing a new tax, if he rejoices at the idea of a useful reform, why, since they talked to us about salt, have they not employed the time in fixing in a precise manner the state of those economies that they have only announced to us? It is again the reporter who furnishes us with the answer to that question, expressing in page 16 in terms which I have read several times, always with increased surprise, and which I beg the chamber to weigh well with reflection. Your commission, said the reporter, have regarded the establishment as a new branch of revenue, that is to say, the tax upon salt, as so extremely necessary that they have charged me to declare that without that tax you have not to hope for either economy or amelioration or for the return of any credit. And what connection, may I ask your colleague, what connection does there exist between the tax upon salt and the ameliorations and reforms that are to be operate in the other parts of the service? How then, that tax acknowledged by those same commissioners the 24th of Vendemiaire as impolitic, inquisitorial, and of no profit, becomes all at once so necessary that we are solemnly informed that if we again refuse them, we must renounce the 25 millions of economies and reforms that they thus make to depend entirely upon that odious tax, discredited yesterday at this tribune, but without which there's no safety for the people at this moment. So manifest a contradiction, so strange a connection between the ameliorations so long retarded and a tax which they never cease to reproduce, proves to every honest man that the exaggerated calculations of that reporter and the fearful images which he has described to us have no other end than to wrest from us the tax upon salt. What confidence can all that phantasmagoria inspire in us? As for me, I declare that it is demonstrated to me clearly that the deficit cannot arrive at 50 millions, and that the reforms will in a great measure cover it. I think it reasonable just in politics to know precisely the amount of those reforms before we accord another tax. And then, if there still remains some millions to be found, we will discuss the choice of a new tax. The nation then, instead of seeing in us only the distributors of its revenues, will see also the economists. Then there will no longer remain any suspicious with those who think that all the reforms pompously announced are only a deceitful illusion offered at a distance to mislead us. It is here the case to explain more in detail that doctrine which has been propagated for some months past with so much profusion, a doctrine that I have already remarked is too favorable to luxury and tending, as a last consequence, to tax the bread that the great majority of the French people procure by the sweat of their brow. That doctrine which they endeavor by all means to introduce among us is the true cause of the obstinacy which they evince against the tax upon salt. That tax will not produce scarcely anything this present year, but our law would be the prelude to the admission of the financial system of England, which monarchical governments charged with an immense debt may covet, but which Republican legislators must repulse. They want to arrive at drawing from what they call the multitude enormous sums which render without doubt, generally speaking, the tax upon the commodities of the first necessity. But because that doctrine remained for a moment without reply, do they believe it cannot be attacked? It is sufficient that a tax will produce a great deal that they should adopt it? Do they think to dazzle us by a pompous comparison to the state of England with ours? The prosperity of England? Where then do they see it with so much certainty? Have they thoroughly calculated the extent of her debt and the influence of the taxes upon the population, have they examined if it is not upon that basis that reposes the omnipotence of a minister king? Have they forgotten that Fox and Sheridan are reduced to appear no longer in the British Senate, or that it is vain that they cause their immortal voices to be heard? No, representatives of the people, let us not quit the rigid principles of popular wisdom for the financial system of our enemies. There, where the legislators have the imprudence to open the veins of the state, the exhaustion, a mortal exhaustion, is inevitable. In talking to us of the prosperity of England, have they made all these reflections? As for the public credit, does it not repose in safety under a good administration, under reforms that have been accomplished and not promised only? Would they make us believe also that the public credit depends upon the tax upon salt? Yes, without doubt. It is what the Citizen Mao and Jacquemin want to make us believe. I will reply to them by a single observation, which 600,000 men and 80 ships of war, our army and our marine remain under that number. There cannot then exist at this moment a deficiency so pressing to force the contractors to double the price of their bargain. We are assured, however, that the distrust of those contractors really exists. Well, if that is really the case, we must attribute it to other causes. It is the enormous sacrifices that are exacted by the subaltern agents which cause the dearness of the markets. It is there, and not in the doctrine of Smith, that you should see the source of the credit and the mistrust. And if the Directory knows how to punish those who abuse its confidence, the dearness of the prices will cease, and the effects will disappear with the cause.